Origin is in the rear view mirror as now it's time to look ahead. It is the race to the finals, and unlike the past couple seasons, we have another battle on our hands. So many lopsided scores last year, so many blowouts. The top six were in a completely different league to the rest of the competition. There are 4 teams on 20 points, and mathematically any one of them could play finals football. But in today's video, we're just going to be focusing on 5 of the teams. The Parramatta Eels in 7th, the Sydney Roosters in 8th, the Manly Warringah Seagulls in 9th, the Canberra Raiders in 10th, and the St George Illawarra Dragons in 11th. Any of these teams, in my opinion, are a genuine chance to play finals football. There are 2 spots left. In my opinion, the Storm and Rabbitohs will be safe despite being on the same points as the Parramatta Eels because of their run homes and their for and against. But let's get straight into this video, guys. Smash that like button if you do enjoy it. Subscribe if you're new around here and you haven't already. And of course, leave your comment down below. Who plays finals footy in 2022? Who makes that top 8 spot? And let's get straight into it. Now guys, remember, this is all just my opinion. If you want to do the ladder predictor yourself, it is available now on NRL.com. The great thing about this year is there are so many key matchups that we'll get to in a minute. So these teams will decide their future. There isn't a reliance on scores going your way. Of course there will be. But if these teams want to play finals footy, it will come down to 1 or 2 games, especially for a team like the Roosters or the Manly Warringah Seagulls, and the Parramatta Eels have a very tough run home. So I'm likely to be wrong, but let's take this more as where I think the teams will finish rather than exactly me tipping every single game. Like I said, guys, just my opinion. So let's get straight into it. 11th down to 7th. 2 spots remain in the top 8. Who makes the finals? We got the Eels, the Roosters, Manly, the Raiders, and the St George Illawarra Dragons. And unfortunately, coming in at that dreaded 11th place, I have the St George Illawarra Dragons. They currently sit there right now, and the main reason I think that they won't be able to move up is because they do have a pretty tough run home. They can get a few W's that I haven't given them, but they currently have a points differential of -98. So they're going to have to go above the Raiders, Manly, and the Roosters in terms of points, in my opinion, to have a chance. So here is their run home. They play the Cowboys at home, then they have a 2-week away trip against the Sharks and the Raiders. They'll return home to play the Titans before going west again to play the Tigers, and they return for their final game of the season at home against the Broncos. In my opinion, they will lose most of their games. I've got them going 2-4 over this period. I don't see them beating the Cowboys in Townsville, especially after last weekend's shenanigans. I think Toddy Payton will get the Cowboys up. The Sharks, they're in great form. Now, that is a rivalry game, and the Sharks pumped them earlier. So, like I said, guys, and this is going to be the last time I say it, this is my opinion. And obviously, I don't know who's going to get injured. I don't know who's going to get suspended, so I could be very wrong. Now, they go to Canberra to play the Raiders. I've got them losing that. That is an extremely important game. That is one of the games that we have in this little fixtures that we're going to go through that will decide whether the Dragons make the top 8 or whether the Raiders will make the top 8. Then I've got them beating the Titans, obviously, and beating the Tigers. I could see them dropping to the Tigers, to be honest, but I don't think they will, and their final game will be against the Broncos. They could win that if the Broncos decide to rest all their players, but I don't think they will. I think the Broncos will get the job done there. So I predict that they'll go 2-4 over this period. That leaves them at the end of the season on 24 points with 11-13 losing record. And for that reason, that's why I have the Dragons in 11th place. Now, we're going to build some drama. We're not going to 10th. We're going to 7th. And despite their awful run home, I do think that the Parramatta Eels will finish in 7th place. They currently sit outside the pack on 24 points, but only with a points differential of +14. Their run home is brutal. Against Penrith, at 4 Pines Park against Manly. They'll return home for the Rabbitohs and the Bulldogs before going to Brisbane to take on the Broncos, and they'll finish their season against the Melbourne Storm. Look, it's an awful run home, and I don't know. If there's one team who I'm definitely not going to predict, it's these Parramatta Eels. I've got them losing to Penrith, losing to Manly, losing to the Rabbitohs, but then I think they'll come good with big wins over the Bulldogs, close win over the Broncos, but then I think they'll be able to get a big win over the Melbourne Storm. They've had the wool. I think that's the term. I don't know. They have the wool over the Melbourne Storm in previous years, so I do think the Parramatta Eels will be able to make the 8. 2 points clear. They want to make sure they don't tie with points, because all these teams, when it comes to for and against, the Roosters have such a big advantage over all these sides. So Parramatta will want to stay 2 points ahead of them. I think they will. I think going 3-3, starting off losing their first 3, then winning their next 3 is probably the safest thing to do. I think they'll bounce back well after the Rabbitohs loss if they do lose 3 in a row and pick up a big win over the Bulldogs, especially after all the criticism of them losing to them. Then they'll beat the Broncos, because I think that they'll also want to do for the Dogs game, get some redemption after a disappointing performance. And I just think that maybe the Broncos will have cemented their spot by then. And then lastly, the Storm, well, maybe they can fix it, but even Craig Bellamy said it's going to be hard for them to fix it. So I've got them winning 3 games, losing 3. That'll get them to 30 points, 14-10 record, and that will put them in 7th place. So, 3 teams left: Manly, the Roosters, and the Raiders. And in 10th position, I have the Canberra Raiders. It's not the worst run home. They'll go to Gold Coast to play the Titans, return home to Geo to take on Penrith and the Dragons. Then they'll play the Knights at Newcastle. Then they'll return home to play Manly, and then they'll go and play the Tigers. So, it's not the worst run home, but I'd hate to sound like a broken record, but they're going to have to win more games than the Roosters. That's what this all comes down to, that dreaded for and against. So it's going to be tough for the Raiders. They do have the advantage of a soft run home, but the Raiders have proven they're somewhat Eels-like in the sense that they can drop an easy game. It wouldn't surprise me if they drop a game to the Titans. It would not surprise me at all if they didn't beat the Dragons. And it wouldn't surprise me if they lost to the Tigers. It also wouldn't surprise me if they beat Manly. They're not going to beat Penrith, so let's just stop right there. So over this period, I've got them going 4-2. I've got them beating the Titans, losing to Penrith, beating the Dragons, beating the Knights, losing to Manly, and beating the Tigers. If they are able to win that Manly game, based on what I got here, they will claim 8th place. So it's not over yet for the Raiders. Of course it's not. That's why I'm making the goddamn video. But if they can go 5-1 and go on to 30 points with the Eels, then they will claim that spot. But it's going to be tough to get that for and against over the Sydney Roosters, who we'll get to in a second, because now, guys, there's one spot left. Manly and the Roosters. And Thursday night's game just got a whole lot more interesting, because I've got a feeling whoever wins that gets this final spot in the top 8 and coming in 8th place. I can't be that biased. I've gone the Sydney Roosters. The Roosters currently sit on 20 points, a 79 positive for and against, by far the best on this list. Their run home is pretty hard though, but to be honest, I've been somewhat biased to them. They go to 4 Pines Park to play Manly, then they return home for 3 straight games against the Broncos, Cowboys and Tigers. Then they'll go to Melbourne to take on the Storm, and then they finish off their season against the South Sydney Rabbitohs in the opening of the new Allianz Stadium. I've got them going 4-2 over this period, so they'll finish on 28 points with a 13-11 record. I think they'll be able to beat Manly this Thursday night. I think they'll be able to beat the Broncos. I don't think they can beat the Cowboys, but then I think they'll be able to beat the Tigers and the Storm, and then unfortunately I think they'll end up losing to the Rabbitohs, because the Bunnies have the edge over the Roosters in recent times. So I've got the Roosters finishing in 8th, 28 points, just behind the Parramatta Eels, tied with the Raiders, but I think they're 4 against will get them home. So the Roosters and the Eels, they'll finish in 7th and 8th. So just missing out. It breaks my heart. In 9th place, we have the Manly Warringah Seagulls. They currently sit on 20 points and 18 for and against, so the second best on this list. Their run at home is 50-50. They go play the Roosters and the Eels at home, then they'll go to the Gold Coast to play the Titans, return home for the Sharks, so they have the wood over, then they'll go and play the Raiders in Canberra and finish it out away against the Bulldogs. Manly will suffer from the same thing I just said the Raiders will suffer from, that goddamn for and against. Now look, I may be biased, but if they can knock off the Sharks, then they're in for a sniff. Manly have to win 5 of their last 6 games. If Manly and the Raiders can win 5 of their last 6, they'll play finals football. But if the Roosters can just go 4-2, then they'll make it. The Roosters have the advantage when it comes to this, guys. They can tie with any one of these teams below them, and they'll make the 8. They could even tie with the Eels, and they'll make the 8. Manly and the Raiders will have to go 5-1 to stand a chance, because even if Parramatta do struggle throughout this period and go 2-4, they'll still be tied. So Manly will have the advantage there because they do have a 1 point lull for and against advantage over the Eels. So look, all I can say is it's going to be a very interesting run home. There are so many key games. Manly versus the Roosters, Manly versus the Eels, Manly versus the Sharks, the Dragons versus the Raiders, the Roosters versus the Rabbitohs could even have a big say on the top 8. And all these teams, well, not all these teams, but the Eels and Roosters who play the Storm, that could be a game when we think of their tough run home that's actually pretty winnable, and I've got them winning both of them. So, look, it's very interesting time. Who says footy gets boring post-Origin? Guys, who finishes 11th? Who finishes 10th? Who finishes 9th? And who is playing finals football in 2022? Leave that in the comment section down below. Obviously, subscribe if you haven't already. If you love your rugby league, then this is the place you want to be, and it's completely free. You want to be, and it's free. So smash that subscribe button, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more. Guys, who makes the top 8? I'll see you guys in the next one.